How about now? Was it muted? I expect it was muted. So, once again, hello everyone. Welcome to the broadcast. Sorry about that. We're going to be getting back into our game dev today. Last time we fixed some stuff and improved some stuff related to object movement. Made it so it's going to be easier to get things. Would it be easier for us to make modular upgrades? So next, we do need to start working on getting those upgrades applied systematically so that we can get that, stick it to a weapon spawner, and go from there. Additionally, getting some logic for resetting a weapon spawner fully and then applying the upgrades appropriately to it would be a possibility. We'll have to see how that unfolds. Let's check in with the kitties, though. It looks like we can only see Sky. Sammy's on my lap. Ember and Sherbet are getting some food. I laid out some kibble, and they all like that. Like, wet food is great, but kibble is like potato chips, essentially. So I do get the more healthy variety. A high protein, low carbs kind. Since cats do get a little carbs from, like, naturally they get carbs from, like, prey animals they eat, but very little of it. So high grain, high starch kind of stuff isn't really part of their natural diet. Inexpertly flounder at throwing something away. All right, but let's pop back in here. Set the camera here. Switch over to the coding screen. Give us a look at where we left off last. Now, one of the things we changed is made it so movement only happens 10 times a second. So I feel like there's some loss of fluidity here. I want to take another look at that. I want to make this a constant, though. Hey there, Pedro. Welcome back. Pass the delta into movement, and then movement decides whether it's going to make these changes or not. Hey there, Copper. Now, one thought I had was to move delta and seconds passed out of movement and just have them apply their max vector and then apply the delta here so that we can just record this instead of having this awkward little bit. And I think I forgot to say it, but hey, Okaneki, thanks for joining us right at the beginning there. But I want to make some constants. So we're going to go into our constants node. I have this code pulled up. There we go. Let's say, oh, hey, Orcs. Good to see you again. Haven't seen you in a little bit. You're joining us for one of our game dev streams. And hello, Horo. Greetings, everyone. Greetings. We're going to do, as I inevitably say, I say that we're going to do a particular goal and then we, excuse me, and then we hair off on something completely different. We're making a Vampire Survivors style game, Orcs. So the number in the upper left is the number of creatures, these blobs that there are. But projectiles in these purple bubbles are also counting towards a 500 entity limit. So we're going to grab a bunch of these bubbles so that the weapons are spawning. I don't like how stilted the movement feels here. Something feels off. Anybody else seeing it? Maybe I'm hallucinating it. But it feels like very frequently there are that there's some choppiness to their movement. Let's test it though. We're going to say constant welcome back, Copper. That makes sense. A time segment. That's how much it moves on. We're going to call it that. And it's going to be 0.1. So now what we should be able to do is instead of in move using seconds past, we're going to use No, this is right. This is right. We need to put it here. Constant physics time segment. So now we have seconds past being passed in, but I actually think we want to remove this and just have movement modifiers be completely uninfluenced by that the delta time. And then we'll apply it in the global movement. Let's go on down here. If you have questions or anything about what's going on, feel free to ask them. As far as what I'm doing a lot of coding and stream of consciousness speaking. We're doing a bit of rubber duck development to chat here. But this is also a good opportunity for chat or just general conversation if you'd like. I'm down for coding more slowly to talk with everyone. But I will get distracted. I will get hyper-focused, so it might take me a moment to notice that chat is moving again. Okay, here's movement. We need movement modifiers. Movement modifier by default has a delta, which we're going to remove. But that means we have to go through all of our movement modifiers and make sure that they implement the move function correctly, if they do at all. These are targeting, so they shouldn't. Base target needs the move in order to do what it does. We'll have to fix that in a moment. Well, hello there, Rip. accept a delta, and we'll remove the delta from that. So when we get the avoiding vector, the delta there, which should break something in this function. Oh, no, it doesn't. We didn't even need the delta in there. Okay, that should be all of them. So now if we go back down to movement template, or movement modifier, remove seconds passed from that. Okay, why you not do this properly, code? Hey there, Araba. You have been in a few streams, yes. And hello, Kayla. Hello. Welcome, everyone. Movement modifier. I did change you. Why are you? Why you not obey? All right, let's reload the project. Movement. Okay, that should be fine now. We multiply this by seconds passed. So we should be able to call this last velocity. No, that one is Mason. That's his brother. Mason tends to just lay there kind of on his side or lightly loafed. Can't we see Sherbet? Sherbet is gymnast cat, as you say. Doesn't look like he's on camera right now. No worries, Araba. If you got other stuff to do, go, get to it. Okay, I think this is part of the stilted movement. So the times equals seconds passed. So this gives us the velocity, and then we're going to say the move this here. We only update the last velocity here. To last velocity times delta. Welcome back, Bacon Hunter. Okay, let's think through this flow again. We reset the velocity if we're going to reprocess here. Then we go through each movement modifier and it will alter the velocity. It will alter the velocity without any sort of delta to it. Then we store the velocity that we have, and then we modify it by seconds passed and reset seconds passed. So we're going to wait to reprocess for that much. Otherwise, we set the velocity to the last one times the delta. And then we move. Okay, this should totally work. Okay, I feel like they're moving a lot more smoothly now. Because previously they weren't getting that last movement. All right, let's let them all close in. We are at over 350 entities now. Once it hits equilibrium, that will be about... okay, we are at 500 things now. It says 459, but there are 500 things total. And our frame rate is largely unaffected. Now, we do need to correct some stuff about the player movement, because the player is moving faster than they should now and again. So let's look at our monitor, or FPS there. We are getting some stutters down to 30, but given that we're at max things on screen, I think that's okay. We are then going to go into player. This is us actually moving. Not yet. Where am I? We are definitely going to have to do further optimization like that. Interestingly, let's see here. There is something for just trying multi-threading right away. Okay, we're going to split physics off to a separate thread. There's also another physics engine we can try. Hey there, King. We're doing good. And welcome, Lion. Welcome, welcome. Okay, so we're doing physics on another thread here. One thing that we may ultimately do where is changing enemy motion from being individual motion to being some sort of like block type motion. Because all enemies currently behave the same, but I would ultimately like to have some individual behaviors. Okay, we're at maximum. Let's check our monitor. Ooh, okay, we do get a plunge when we switch. Okay, yeah, right there. We're getting some big hits. So it's right on the edge when they all start to like converge and collide that we still get some hits. So here's another thing we can try. We're going to reset that. And then we're going to go into our physics engine, we're going to say use a different one. The purple thingies are another placeholder. If I touch those, it adds another weapon spawner to the player. It is a debugging item called Item Giver. Okay, so now we're using Rapier Physics, which is a higher performance physics engine. It's not officially adopted by Godot yet for 2D performance. It's a plugin right now. Godot's 2D physics engine hasn't been updated as much as the 3D one. Okay, we're looking to hit equilibrium. I don't want to move too much because it'll delete blobs. Okay, we're at equilibrium. We're running to the edge where some of the blobs start to get eaten. Physics server we're using a model that is close to that. Where am I? Let me show you. Oh, this is holding pretty well. Oh yeah, look at that. Look at that, constant 60. Rapier performs better in mass collision scenarios, which is pretty much it. So let me show you. I discovered some tutorials on things like improving performance in bullet hell games, where you have flooded the screen with projectiles, which is a similar thing to what we're doing. They take it one step further by moving the rendering out there as well. But they did concede that you could just use animated sprites like we are. So we are going to go to our game world. So if you look, we have these 4 collision zones. These are just area 2Ds. And all they do is they report if a collision happens. And then the monsters are loaded into this one. The item givers are loaded into this one. Player projectiles go into this one. And the player lives in this one. All of these entities are just collision shapes that are added to that area 2D. They're collision shapes with some tracing rays and animated sprites. So with some extra overhead for the Godot tree structure, we're pretty much doing a physics server style implementation. Okay. This is something that we need to crop as well. So we don't need to do this as often. This HUD element is temporary. It's just the thing that drives the number in the upper left. Okay, time sense physics update is going to be constants dot physics time segment. So now we're saying only 10 times a second do we update the world physics, like the world rendering physics. We are freeing the objects. Eventually, we're probably going to loop them so that if we need them again, we can reuse it. There will be some fiddliness with that because we have a lot of entities that are a little more unique, but we could still do some sort of dictionary kind of list thing to say, give me one of these. Since the ones of these tend to be the same, there's a further wrinkle in that the logic of each individual mob can be slightly different. Like, every homing mouse projectile isn't necessarily the same as every other one. We would need to reset them, which is still possible. But you are correct. That's another place that we could have performance improvement because we don't need to free them and remake them. Okay, so we're cutting that down. We have our physics time segment applied here. And it's applied to all movement things. Collisions will still be able to be reduced down, but by reducing their handling, their movement logic down to physics slices, that should help performance in general. Ultimately, I would like to have that universal physics handling where it does it in slices, where we would look at the total collision after a movement. But there is some kind of fiddliness with that. We want to be careful with that. But yeah, every one of these blobs has a collision area around it. Well, it's a shape. And the creature movement area moves those shapes around. The only thing that each individual one does the only thing each individual one does is that it has a trio of 2D vectors that it uses to kind of keep each other off of each other. That way we don't have to have individual collision handling, like full collision handling. It just says, is there something in front of me? So we still can get some overlap like this. I wish we didn't. But it shouldn't be an issue just for now. But yeah, when we switch over to Rapier, we get a big performance boost. Now let's do one more. Let's do Rapier on another thread. So we're going to verify... Did I set it properly? Yes, okay. We're going to verify that the performance doesn't decrease when we're doing this. Where did you come from? Well, that shouldn't happen. We'll have to keep an eye on that. Setting that on a separate thread might actually be a problem because we might be spawning a creature before. Yeah, we're seeing a lot more overlaps here. We are going to have to fix it so that the position of the spawner needs to be updated more regularly. Because we're getting duplicates. We're getting them spawned right on top of each other. Okay, we had a bit of a hitch there. Look at our monitor. Little hiccup there. So let's go into our spawners. If the entity count, let's bump it up to 750. We're increasing the entity count by 50%. Most of them will be blobs. They are moving, colliding entities. We're getting a plummet at a closing in on 700. Okay, yeah, we're hitting a limit there. I think I want to kind of stress test this. We don't need 700 things on screen at once. Oh, wow. If other... Okay, this shouldn't happen. This is related to the movement of the spawn zone. We shouldn't be able to get a blob right on top of us to start with. There is a there's like a box around the edge of the screen just past it that will kind of there's a point on it that we rotate around to determine where a spawn happens. But I think we're going to have to come up with some sort of like token system to say, hey, something spawned here recently. Hey there, Luz. Or Luz. Okay, we're approaching, I think we still have it set at 750, do we? 700. Okay, we're at 700 things. Check our monitors. I would say 600 might be a good point of equilibrium. Yes, the blob things will be killable and are actually killable. Interesting. Well, these are supposed to go away. They're not. Yeah, we're getting some idiosyncrasies here. Those should be passing into other objects. Okay. So with a small number of entities where the native Godot collision detection works pretty well. Like, it works decently. The problem is that even with like quad tree, octree, culling down of physics collisions, once you have like closing in on 500 things on the screen, the number of collision checks that have to happen per frame gets unwieldy really fast. So the thing that we're doing, let me show you a mob's body. Targeting spawner. Behaviors out of the way. Mob body. Okay. So a mob's body is a shape. It's this circle. And then it has these 5 ray casts off of it. So, side and fronts. These get constrained down to the radius of the circle. The length of each raycast gets constrained down to whatever this shape is. When they're moving, this circle doesn't bump into other circles. This ray will. This ray will detect that it hits another body. But what's happening is that these rays keep them off of each other. But the collision with the player, or the projectile's collision with an enemy object, is handled by these collisions. There are only 4 entities, technically 5 entities, that can collide with each other. Anything that isn't the player can run into these barriers here. These 4 constitute one thing. They are the mob survival area. There are 4 shapes that compose it. If they touch it, all it does is removes them. This is one of those areas we could recycle them. Then, the monster collision zone only cares about the player. It lives in the enemy region, and it only checks for the player. So mobs don't care if they touch a projectile themselves. And they only care if they touch the player. They will tell the player that they touched them. Object collision zone. See, that lives in object, and it only looks for the player. If a player bumps into one of those bubbles, the object tells it, tells the player, I touched you. Bullet collision zones look for enemies. And the enemy tells the bullet tells the enemy, I touched you. And it's usually going to be the bullet says, enemy, take this much damage. A player doesn't care about anything. Player just moves around. So ultimately, this saves us some trouble by culling down the number of collisions and the number of entities involved. Just like when using the physics server directly, there's a lot of extra footwork that we have to do to identify which bullet or which monster bumped into what, but we've narrowed it down so that it's logically easy. So each of these survival areas usually has, here we go. So it's a collision zone. If a collision happens, it identifies what the local shape is, the shape that's a part of that zone, and what other shape bumped into it. The area and its shape, the self, the collision zone, and its shape. These are indexes. You don't get an object reference. We do technically get the area reference, but we need this index. Then we tell it to handle the collision, and that's if we have two mob bodies, we handle that collide. We can actually narrow this down further. What sort of system I'm running it on? I mean, I'm running it on a reasonably recent graphics card, and minimum spec on release. We're going to keep that as low as possible. It's set. We're trying to make it run at 60 frames a second, but if it can handle 60 frames, we could have it go as low as 30, which means we should be able to keep the specs really low. There will inevitably be further optimizations as we move on. What I'm doing right now is I'm doing a lot of over optimization. Again, 500 to 600 things on screen at once, or I'm sorry, not even on screen, in existence at once, is mostly overkill. If you reach the point where there were that many enemies on screen, you have already lost. You were wiped out well before that. You would be taking so much damage during that time. If other shape and local shape, that. Okay, make sure if we don't get one of these that we don't try to do a collision. Mob survival area is a collision zone, okay. And it has a handle collision override. Okay. So we do need that same sort of logic. We're coding a game, Devil. Still need to solve that. One of them is always spawning right at origin, and that should never happen. Let's touch some of these bubbles again. Was weird. Also weird. Let's do that again. Let's zoom out. Remote, core, game, player, body, camera. Like, these should go away when I bump into them. The spawners are separate entities. They are, there is a... This is not how it's going to be long-term, but we have one that spawns the bubbles and one that spawns the blobs. And off the, like, right about out here, we have a box that you can check a point on. See where the bubbles are appearing? How we've got a harder and harder line? That's where the spawning, the spawners are getting, are setting their spawn point to. Or are having it set to. We need to prevent this. This happens when two blobs are spawning on the same spot at that 0.1 times a second. I think we need to set that in spawners too, is the physics slice there. That there's essentially a minimum spawn rate. That's not a bad idea, Tass. Is instead of setting it so that their spawn point updates. Yeah. I could probably have that. And by the way, oh, we've got an error in here. Shape index is out of bounds. I think that might be... We've got to have a better check for that. Okay, that bubble just went away. Why did it go away? Okay, there's something odd going on with collisions here. Can I not look up symbol on area find shape owner? Oh, because we don't know what they are. Yeah, I don't like them overlapping too much. In things like Vampire Survivors and similar, they try to not make them overlap. You can see they sort of vibrate against each other, but not nearly as much. Like their collision bubble is much smaller for each other, which I could accomplish by tightening the vectors, marking that down so that they bump off of each other at a closer area. Why this break? Hey there, Horo. I put the collision zone code. There it is. Collisions. Yeah, they're just areas. We register the collision effect. What if... Well, no. It can't be the physics change. I'm sorry, the time slice change can't be the thing that caused the collisions. That was working before. Let's remove that for one. We still get you. So it's not a threading thing. Check our debugger. We got to keep an eye on that. Okay, we have bubble. We've removed threading. Still not. Check collision area. Where's our item giver? So this is where we should be. Okay. We bumped into the player. We have collide with is an entity. We have no weapon spawners. We attach it, and now we say free the item giver itself. Item giver lingers. It does not go away. But now you can see blobs are going away, so the collision logic triggered. That's what I did to get in there. Like that. Okay. We have another one. We append another, and we increase their speed. Yeah, center spawning. We'll check that in a moment. Okay, let's get into mouse body projectile. It's a new attack. It's hurtable hurt. And the blob says, get rid of me. But it doesn't. See? The projectile itself removes itself, but the other entity doesn't remove itself. Like, they're running the code to free themselves, and the projectile is doing it. But it's like we're getting the wrong entity ID. See, that mouse is flying along. It's not hitting anything. Is rapier physics just not working for it? We're still getting you. This has got to be due to the time slicing. Bubble goes away. Okay. The other shape is not being properly freed under rapier physics. Which is unfortunate because it performs better. So why is that? We're getting the wrong index whenever that happens. So whatever this is, area shape index and local shape index, those are wrong under rapier physics. It is definitely possible. But when we're running under default Godot physics, we get the right shapes each time. So it's possible that the plugin is out of date. Oh yeah, we are actually running the code that says get rid of this. But if you watch sometimes, the thing that is being gotten rid of is not the thing we touched. And we did get some errors where it said that index is out of bounds. So I wonder if we're running into some sort of conflict in how these methods are being handled. Let's area shape entered. We'll get an RID, area 2D, an int in an int. Let's force these. I want to make sure it's an RID. Hello, Sky. By making sure these are here, I can make sure can make sure that these are the right thing. We don't need this anymore. We aren't using bodies. Okay, we've got that. Passing in the area. This is an area 2D. And this is an int. Then handle collision. It should be node and node. We can't be sure what we're getting out of this, so we're going to assert that it is a object in the tree. Those guys. Line shape owner gives us an int. Shape get owner gets us a object. Yeah, we should just use object for this too. Not, oh, actually, no, wait. Yeah, this gets an object. This might go haywire. Oh, yes, absolutely. I agree, Where I want to make sure that I do this wherever possible. Technically object. All right. Shape. Local shapey. Pixely, we are writing a game in Godot engine. We are currently trying to fix a physics issue when we're trying to use a more robust physics engine. It acting weird. In the classic programming, that's not supposed to do that. Okay, let's... look in game. So every physics update, we change the spawner area. But what we can do is when we create the spawners, we can do this as well. Duplication of code, but a lot of this is make it work code. Yep. If this was an established code base, like we got it to a stage where we don't want to, we think we're ready to roll, or we get it to good enough, then I would be avoiding large-scale refactoring, because that'll ripple throughout. On the plus side, most of the things that I end up refactoring tend to be within that kind of domain itself. When it spills out, we get problems. And hey there, Zell. Okay, yeah. It's the spawner had an opportunity as soon as it came into existence and popped on the tree for it to have a spawner position that was out of place. I think the rolling list is where we want to get. So we collide properly, but you can see some of these blobs are not going away. The projectiles don't go away sometimes too. See? That projectile is latched onto that target, but that target didn't go away because its area wasn't removed. That's not supposed to happen. Why are you doing that? Oh, stepped over. Let's get local shape. Should be the same thing. Okay, no, let's do that again. Other shape is the problem usually, because the one itself... No, that's not how it works with the... Both of these can be wrong. Shape index is 0. This is the player, I think. Yeah, it's colliding with player. So that other area is the player collision zone. This is player collision zone. So other shape should be the player. Let's identify the player here. No. This could be a higher piece of the player. But 11 digits. It's weird. That is a good question there, Where I think we've got good enough performance without it. Yeah. That's a good point. If we're running into a problem with an external library and we don't have to use it, that is definitely true. Why are we using it? Oh, that's the kind of thing that I often find myself telling people, and it's to some extent irritating that I had to be told. Open source can be a cool thing. External libraries can be a development accelerator, but they do create points of failure that you have little control over. Okay. Now we're still threaded. Let's see how that goes. And folks, while I am talking a lot of code, especially with Where in the widescreen stream, feel free to talk about anything else or ask me other questions, even if they're unrelated to coding. A lot of this is stream of consciousness and similar, so. I wonder if there's a way to create a new monitor so I could create a monitor on the entity count. What's my favorite cereal? Well, I tend not to eat cereal these days. If I wanted to eat, cereal that's really bad for me, but delicious, Lucky Charms. I like Lucky Charms. Uh, even the off-brand stuff, even the like store brand Lucky Charms, those are still good. A little lighter weight on the sugar content, but still in the sugar cereal territory. Things like Golden Grams, the honey graham cracker style things, those are good. Okay, at about 700 entities, we can hit. We're oscillating around 30 frames per second. Which I still think is probably good enough. We could separate that down and have a kind of a dictionary of spawn limits, but we've got to be careful about that. We don't want to accidentally cull things that are going to be visible to the player, or prevent spawning when it's necessary. So not spawning a new mob is fine. Not spawning a new projectile is very bad. Interesting. We're getting an interesting uptick in performance here. What's going on? Okay, no, we weren't. Have any orphan nodes or anything? No, there's just a lot going on. Ew. Ew. Done and done. Stay classy, internet. I don't think we should expect a lot from a person that uses both a Ronald McDonald profile icon paired with the name of one of the edgiest of Warhammer 40,000 Space Marine Primarchs. Like, most goth emo, I am the knight style Space Marine Primarch. Okay. Let's go into our spawner. We're going to set that limit back down to 500. See how we hold. I would also like to make it so that the mobs have a point of equilibrium where they stop, like, wiggling off of each other. As you can see, when they bounce like this, this is the raycast don't collide with this object logic. We're spending a lot of time on optimization, I recognize that, but this logic that we're touching right now is sort of critical space, you know? We really need this to work right. Okay. At about 500 entities on screen, we're pretty solid. Let's cull that down further. Hey, Brooklyn. Welcome. We're in the midst of our game development stream here. If we change entity count to be per entity, and we do a series of ors. Well, or if else's. It'll be ugly, but effectively a big switch, you know? Oh, wow. That was a hiccup there. Look at that. All right, let's go find some of these bubbles. We're going to get a whole bunch of bubbles. Now, interestingly, this logic of touching it and touching these objects and getting weapons improved and similar is not far off from what the end state would be. There would be collectibles on the ground, which if you touch, you might get a weapon upgrade. You know, because a threshold is hit, or it's a treasure box, or stuff like that. Interesting. None of the weapons are spawning. Oh, we hit equilibrium. This is what I was talking about. Bullets should always be able to spawn. Okay, let's put a limiter on here. Stop that. I'll call you total entity count. We're actually going to remove that. This is another place where the int equal to you'll see in a lot of these games where commonly like XP points drop on the ground. Hey there, Shadow. Welcome to the broadcast. We are coding our game and currently working on spawn limitations. Int is equal to that. Well, thank you, Shadow. I appreciate that. Monsters is greater to that, and is it oh no. Spawn dot pool type is equal to I do wish that that enum would come into play here. Or would default in a option for that. No, Shadow, there are several other people that have been in chat. It might be that they are currently looking away or considered idle or multiple things like that. As in, it varies from moment to moment. Elif. Yeah. Elif. Objects. We only really need 50 of these, I think. Well, thank you, Shadow. I appreciate that. And bullets. Let's give us 100 bullets on screen. That might be plenty for now. Let's be really generous here. We're gonna say 300. Welcome back, Okaneki. Dot player bullet. Yeah, player bullet. Yep, the lower one is sherbet. What game am I coding? I'm making a Vampire Survivors style game. We are still in the early pre-alpha period of dev here. Okay, so mobs should stop at 300, which is plenty of creatures. I think a flag on a spawner, such that it uses that cycling series of points, would probably be viable. Okay, now we're going to touch the bullet spawners here. Well, Shadow, when you're adopting a shelter cat, most of the time, the cost of the cat is kind of inversely related to the age of the cat. Like an elderly pet adopted from a shelter is way less expensive than a young pet. For multiple reasons, is that one, they want to encourage people to adopt the elder animals. It is usually a sad state of affairs that the elderly animals end up like dying in the shelters. But additionally, with the younger ones, there's also the cost offset of giving them all their shots and the like. Hello? Am I not audible? Okay. All right. We still need to fix some of the physics in that we're getting a limited series of collisions. With the number of projectiles we have, we should be seeing a whole lot more blobs around us getting wiped out. Tricky, tricky. Part of this is going to be looking at the collisions and making sure that the entity is not already struck. So potentially some sort of callback from like maybe hurtable hurt for the bullets. Yeah, that might work. If the entity has already been struck and is going to be removed, then we can not queue free. We could just choose not to queue free the bullet. Let's try that. But I think this is enough creatures, don't you guys? Like, if you have this many, like, on top of you, you're done already. You would have to have that safe circle of, like, desperate defense in order for this many things to be relevant. Like, they would be at the edge of the screen if you had the necessary dead zone around you to not lose. Vampire Survivors does have some gimmick builds where they could be on you and you could stay alive, but I don't think we'll be coding for that. So what we'll do is we'll make some constants for these that I can adjust. So let's go into... Well, it is highly inadvisable for users and against their terms of service to consume nanofluid. Which ones might speculate those blobs are made of, but that is a media rumor that should not be considered. But if you think you did ingest nanofluid, then be sure to contact Catbot Corporation's emergency hotline, and we will send agents over to your house to resolve the problem. You are advised to stand near an open window or out in front of your door where you are clearly visible from the nearest street. Thinky, thinky, thinky. Okay, yeah. The mouse is going to be... It's going to call hurtable hurt. Boolean is equal to that. If was hurt, then queue free. Bullet spawning is emitting from the player. Well, there is a separate entity. There is a spawner entity, but the ones that are emitting the weapons are coming from the player. Like, they get glued to the player. So while everything spawns in generally the same way, the player has its own weapon spawning, like set of weapon spawners. Like a spawner is just code for emitting objects. So this is code that emits like bullets or blobs or similar. Shadow, I was under the impression that that was some sort of like general statement word or compliment word or a exclamation, not a noun. Perhaps it is both a noun and such. But as my knowledge of modern parlance and memes is often limited, I probably would not do such. Um, that's what we're doing there. Where am I? Physics handling, like collision detection, is currently happening on a separate thread. If you are listening, Shadow, we answered that question. Uh, too long, didn't read, or didn't listen. No. I might have to wrap a something around a mob body to say it's a monster so that I can have this kind of thing built into it. That'll probably work. Okay, but it's about halfway through the stream, so time for a quick break. If you haven't already and you like what you have been seeing, consider following, subscribing, that sort of thing. Additionally, if you would like to help support the channel, then you can do so through YouTube memberships, Patreon, and Coffee. With that, I will be right back. And we're back. Dying as bool. False. If not dying, do this. Turn, not dying. Then in projectile mouse. Yep. Welcome back, 3. Thanks for swinging through. Let's find a bubble. Yeah, I can wrap things like monsters in projectiles, so some of this handling is default. Oh, well, okay, that's not working how I want it to work, but look at them go. Right, but this does allow us to do something interesting here. Is this would be logic for, like, projectile penetration. Hey there, mate. That's fun. The truncation of your name ends up being the essential as greetings, friend. All right, 3. Thanks for swinging through. Every time I touch these, the projectiles should be getting faster. Oh, I think I may have changed that. Yeah, I changed how they get faster. So we'd have to do the get faster differently, but... this game is being coded in Godot engine. I don't like that they're all defaulting to right for their random direction defaulting. See how they're all kind of going up and right when they lose target? That should not be that way, but... You know, we're getting there. We're getting there. Okay, so we did something wrong with the projectile mouse handling. So if whatever it hit was hurt, it frees itself. And the blobs say when a hurt comes in, if it's not dying, and it isn't dying when it comes in, it will set dying equal to true. Oh. Yeah, Yeah, that's kind of the same boat I was in there, mate. The oh man, we got potentially three cats here. Sky is deciding if he wants to join them. So Sherbet and Sky are another where they are comfortable snuggling up to each other. Sherbet definitely, because Sherbet really likes Sky. Sky is my little diplomat cat. He's very friendly to all the cats. Uh, and that made Sherbet really imprint on him. And for a while, Sherbet eventually started to bother Sky by tagging along so close to him. You'd see Sherbet try to run up and snuggle with Sky, and Sky would get up and go somewhere else. Uh, but yeah, there are kind of pairings where they will tolerate each other. I did not, mate. I got this avatar designed and rigged through Animation Studios. I believe the artist was Dendy and the rigger was I think it's Inkjet. That might be the other way around, but I think that's how it went. Well, I always like to show off when somebody expresses interest, so there we go. Yeah, sometimes you get a real oh man, this guy vibe from in Animal Crossing. Maybe someday in the future I would get a 3D avatar made, but getting a 3D avatar that matches the visual quality out of a live 2D is very expensive. But tools like Vroid Studio and similar let you get kind of like a foothold on that without having to invest a lot, since they have a lot of default templates you can adjust. I've seen and known several folks that have used Vroid. This is true, mate. Developing 3D rendering skills is a good skill set. 3D rendering, both in the visual art element and the kind of background rigging for animation, is a good skill set. Okay, if it's not dying when it gets hit, then it will set dying is equal to true and mark to free itself. We don't need to keep Q freeing, is what I'm trying to avoid here. So it's going to return false to hurtable hurt. It was not hurt. Let's force that. And then we go into the mouse. It's something that lends itself to multiple use cases. You can do things like, making animations, making games, that kind of stuff. Okay. Was hurt is currently a null. We pass over it, and was hurt is false. Oh. if it's dying, we hurt it. It's kind of like a skill set that I picked up out of hobby was sprite animation and art. These are 16 by 16 sprites, itty bitty sprites, and I still try to make them as expressive and moving as possible. Which is both like just generally artistic pursuit, but also I can use it in game dev. Video making is something that I can use for editing. I can use outside of YouTubing. And it's something that I picked up as a result. It was hurt, so we free ourselves. So now we're going to get more and more of these bubbles, and it should wipe out more and more blobs per shot. Yeah, I started the kind of hobby that I was doing for a lot of this initial sprite animation is I made a Noida mod to go with a lot of the gameplay on this channel. For a while, Noida was the primary game that we played. We had all kinds of custom stuff that we added. But the sprites that you're seeing, like primarily the little guy in the middle, and the concepts for a lot of this stuff, including for my avatar, comes from that. And Noida has very expressive sprite work, but also very, very tiny. Like by default, Noida's sprites are about like 16 by 16. They are the like classic Game Boy era sprite size. Okay, we are getting some hitching here. And I think some of that might be that Where Am I over on the widescreen stream was talking about things like recycling objects so we didn't have to keep creating and destroying them. And that was that's something that might save us some cost when we are moving around and getting creatures off of screen. So let's see. Fire away. If you got questions, don't worry about it. Just ask them. Infinitely generated, mate. Here, let me. So by going into remote here, I'm editing the world state on the fly. This doesn't change the code. This changes what is running. So we're going to go to 0.1. We're zooming out 10 times. So the player is right around here. And as soon as I am within half a screen of another block, we're going to generate all of the blocks around us. This part is unoptimized, and technically it will be a memory drain over time because this stuff is still rendered. This stuff still can exist. Welcome to the broadcast, Duels. So if you watch, the blobs at the edge here start to go away. That's because there is like a rectangle around the world here that removes any sort of entities that touch it. But yeah, eventually I want to get rid of some of this. Because we don't need to store it. If it is actually rendered, that is a performance cost. If it's not rendered, then there is technically still memory being consumed by setting these values in some way. You know, that's not an impossibility. The trick would be making sure that they are actually rendered properly for their size. But that would be a possibility, is that each one pops into place. So it would need to essentially be a box that is, it goes to the red and is half of it. This is placeholder. These are debugging blocks. The red dot in the center of the squares is the center of a 1080p rectangle. With the red line around it is just visible on the edge of the screen. But if we cut them right, then we could still propagate them. And we already have the coordinates that we would need for them. Oh yeah, we have made a lot of progress though. Lots of progress. Okay, what next? So I want to abstract out some of this, is that when something is hurt, it should, like, if it's a monster, it should have an HP value embedded in it. And when it receives an attack, it reduces its HP by the corresponding amount. And if it takes enough, it goes away. In a similar vein, a projectile could have a penetration value to it. So that might also be a type of modifier we'll eventually want to add. Generally, with this kind of game, you have like piercing, where it will hit one creature and then it will pass through that creature and then hit subsequent ones. Mate, this is GD script. Like, GD script. So Godot script. Though I like to imagine that it's both descriptive and effectively an exclamation. GD script. It is specific to Godot engine. Godot engine does allow you to use C# libraries. It very much changes the workflow, since you would be doing something like coding in Visual Studio Code, compiling, and then loading the libraries into Godot to run them. But additionally, there's a performance difference. C# by its nature is much more efficient at like raw processing and memory management of basic data structures, like searching, sorting, that kind of thing. It is much better at that kind of stuff. Effectively raw math and operations. But if it has anything to do with the physics of the world, then the Godot script is more efficient about that, if it has to touch the world. So it's a balance on that. I am specifically using the Godot script because it is a language to learn. Oh, yeah. They're not in their final state, but to show you. This is how the blob is defined. It is an extension of something called a mob body, a mobile object body. The circle and the little arrows sticking out of it are natural to a mob body. Same with the sprite. Then I go into the blob child class, I set the sprite, and I adjust the size of the circle. Then I load that into this template, which has the mob body here. Well, I'm sorry, mob body here. I have a template that describes how the blob moves. It has a type. It is an enemy type. And then these are the things it tries not to overlap with. Player and enemy here. So that defines it. And then I can put that in other places. So let's see here. Here is that little projectile that we're using. You can see it's centered differently. That kind of thing. Welcome back, Mila. Now, the stats of them, how I'm going to do that, all of that's going to be a little different. So we'll have to figure that out as we go. I could add abstract attributes. Right now, the most abstract thing is movement. So this is how a mouse projectile moves. It chooses a random direction. Then it checks for a random opponent and gets the direction to them. Then it will turn and face its target entity, and it will then move in a straight line towards that entity. So this is in sequence. It picks the random direction, and it remembers that. So if it chooses up and right, it chose up and right. Then it looks for an enemy. If it finds an enemy, it will change the direction to the direction that enemy was in at the time it found it. Actually, target random mob I don't think does that anymore. I think that might be one of the oddities here. Right now we're using 10 per second. That is something that I can change. Like, we could probably still do 5, and it would be pretty good. Frames per second, we're sitting at 60. We're just doing 10 world ticks per second. Where was that? Behavior movement. Home to target doesn't get used anymore. Yep, that's probably what we're going to end up doing, mate, is I'm probably going to make an extension of the mob bodies that represent exactly what type they are. So, like, it's a bullet, it's a monster, it's a object you can pick up or interact with, kind of thing. Hey there, Ghost. And then the templates for those could have their attributes set on them. I would need to have handling for that, but that's a future new problem. That guy can deal with it. Let's look at random direction real quick here. Fire away. I'm not familiar with the pasta theory. Explain, and then maybe I answer. Oh. I generally would be oh man. I would say more ravioli. There is a layering to it. It's kind of a pile of ravioli. There you go, Tess. You could view it as essentially like kind of like a pyramid. Yeah, there you go. For example, if we go to I have an object called core. Core drives like that main menu appearing, the game appearing. That's core's job. Then, if it creates the game handles the actual handling of the game. So it initializes everything, it sets it up. And the game world doesn't exist until core instantiates it. So I don't have to worry about having like a game state sitting in the background that I have to keep paused. I just get rid of it when I'm done with it. Be a little inefficient here. Let's not abbreviate. We don't need to abbreviate. I've spent a non-trivial amount of my life as a programmer professionally. We won't dip into exact numbers, potentially identifying information, but a goodly amount of time. But one thing I learned is that it's kind of a perpetual thing. In the same way that doctors and nurses are expected to update their medical knowledge on the reg, a programmer needs to be absorbing new concepts in order to keep up with their craft. It is easy for a company to try to suppress that when it comes to developers. because the company just wants you to, do what you're told and maintain or build the product as specified. And that might mean there is a declaration of what tools that you are expected to use or what you're going to work on. But if you don't keep moving, if you don't keep new information flowing in, then you can find yourself in kind of a hole when you leave that. What I would say, as far as formal education with programming, formal education is a great way to get theory, like the hows and whys of, like, I think the most primal thing for that kind of learning is learning performance, like lines of execution, how to understand what those are, how complex an algorithm is, as well as how a lot of these structures work. That's useful stuff to know. You can still pick that up by yourself, though. A lot of those resources are out there. But formal training can give it to you in a nice little package. But the ability to learn on the fly and adapt to stuff is more important than knowing whatever the name of the latest system is. Because if somebody says, oh, you're going to use this tool and we're going to use this development pattern, you can just read and find out what that is and then do it. I've had times professionally where somebody has come up and said, oh yeah, we use this pattern. And I look at what they do and I look up what that is, and then you do it. You don't fight it. You can suggest better things, but if that's what we're doing, that's what you're doing. Learn to do it and do it. And that dovetails into this. Anybody can be a game developer. If you have a computer and an internet connection, you have access to all of the tools you need. Like Godot engine, totally free. There's no profit sharing requirements. There's no cost to download it. All the stuff is online. It's like a great big semi-community project. Kind of like Blender. Unity, Unreal Engine, even if they have like profit sharing requirements, they're still free to get. So you combine that with investigating programming languages and tools, and you can get rolling. Now, learning to think in code is something that you have to learn. For some people, it comes faster, but a lot of people need to get out of the mindset that they are fundamentally bad at something and thus can't do it. You can learn some things, and for some folks, it just clicks really fast. But you can work through it. This is barring, conditions like dyslexia and whatnot, where you have a fundamental disadvantage. But even then, there are plenty of people with those kinds of disadvantages that can still do as good, if not better, than others that don't have them. Welcome back, Mila. But there's skills to learn, skills to acquire. And ultimately, it comes down to, do you really want to? Like, you can learn as many languages as you want. Do you want to? Do you have the time and motivation to do it? Do you think that it would be a worthwhile thing? Okay, this one will always assert a random direction. Any given cluster of them will have the same random direction. Interesting. Okay, this is why those things veer off when they lose their target. What I could do is have logic that says this is their last vector, and that movement will always supply a last vector in. You know, let's try that. We're going to go into our homing mouse's movement template. And we're going to remove random direction. Oh, no, I know why there's random direction. Never mind. Random direction is if there are no targets. But kind of what I want is that it not default to this. I do have a Discord. One moment. If you join the server during the stream, there will be a period before you will be able to see the server's contents. You will arrive in a place called the lobby. Until a mod or I let you in, you won't be able to see the rest of the server. That is a bot trap. So that people that join the server can't get in and spam stuff until we let them. It doesn't prevent somebody from getting in and spamming stuff after we let them, but we still have to do it. It primarily protects us from art bots. Well, mitigates art bots. VTubers attract art bots. If you look at a VTuber's Twitter account, there is a decent chance that upwards of like 50% or more of their followers are people that in their profile say that they make streaming assets in VTuber art. Okay, we can't get rid of this, but what if... Let's do this. So random monster says, this is the direction. If I have a random monster, I will set the direction. So then we go into, where is it? Say face target. Face target has a move function. So then target random direction. Face target has a move function despite being a targeter because it needs to set the direction. Calculate target is just used initially. It's if we override the direction, we should respect that. By default, with a movement template, we return a copy of the local target. Fire away, mate. Um, I fully expect we could have a yeet variable, either in the physics collision process for these little guys. When they bump into each other, there is a reverse force that happens to push them away from each other. So that could be a yeet variable. We could have a knockback variable. All kinds of things like that. I wonder if I have to generate a random seed. Like refresh a random seed. Because I feel like we're getting pseudo-random in places. Need more projectiles here. The next kind of targeting that I wouldn't mind is nearest monster. But I haven't I haven't thought about how to do that efficiently. Pretty common in this kind of game. So, like, let's say Vampire Survivors, there's the magic wand item that just fires little low damage bolts at the closest thing to you, the closest opponent to you. We get enough of these. Oh, got a bit of a hitch there. If we get enough of these projectiles going, we should be able to get the I lost my target logic. And what we want is when they lose their target, they just keep flying straight forward. That they don't suddenly veer off. I can do spawn them in a direction. That's going to be a different movement type. I could use just random direction by itself. I mean, you can already see some of the logic when they spawn, that they'll suddenly change directions really fast, because turn and face doesn't have a real turn radius to it right now. I will make some versions of it that do have a turn radius. Maybe I can make like an accuracy value that we could influence too. They could feed into other properties. All right, mate. Thanks for joining us. One of the interesting things of internet streaming is you get to interact with people all over the world. We've had some people in Germany and other spots in Eastern Europe. We've had some folks in South America. All over the place. Some folks in the Middle East area too. right. Have a good night. All right. Have a good evening, Mila. Or good rest of your day, as it were. Yeah. Now they're all just going left. There is something that I have to do with the randomizing logic to reseed it, I think. Um, Neat. Do Gaussian distribution. Ah, okay. Okay, we could force consistent RNG too. Interesting. Okay, let's have that. Then in mob. We're gonna mess with the seed every time we touch these, because I'm getting the impression that within the context of a particular code execution that we're getting the same starting seed. Because we're getting a universal default here. No. This isn't right. That's not right. The thing open there. Random degrees. 47.67. Okay, different number. Getting different numbers. Those should all be shared by the logic here. We calculate, we set the local target, we return it. We say the target is now set. So this will contribute to the chain of events that happens. But turn face target should also be overriding this. We need to get out here so that the turn face target can actually trigger. A target comes in. Local target is the same. target comes in, we have no object and local target. So it has no object. It has a direction, though. Yeah, so this comes in. It hasn't set that object yet. It's a new projectile. Has a target, has a direction. Local target is different. Set it, and now local target in target should be the same. Oh. This is once random direction has contributed to in the calculate, it stops doing that. Let's where's our item giver logic? So we're getting a whole bunch that are they? Okay, I think this is the position modifiers at work. They fan out and their acquired target is off of them. So they come out that way and they veer out. All right, let's make them slower. Put that in here. Speed. Super slow. Get a bubble. Okay, maybe not that slow. Okay, but we are seeing that after they are emitted, but not once targets are acquired. I think we did have one veer hard left there. We're looking for heavy changes in direction because we shouldn't be seeing that anymore. Yeah, right there, I think we were seeing some of that. Some of that is happening as we are charging along here, and they're hitting the edge of the world. Is once again us revisiting the concept of the passing of target data here. Yeah, right there. They're all shifting to go down and left upon running into that issue. Oh, maybe face target is breaking down. Yeah, get direction to target. This could be a problem. We copy the target. And then we get the direction accordingly. Do we ever call update direction? I'll get direction to target. And we never call update direction. If we have a local object, we just use the direction we were given. Oh, hey there, Kebo. Been a little bit. Suddenly they all veer off in this direction, but that direction should have been getting updated. Get direction to target. And then we turn local target.copy. In a similar boat lately, Kebo. In a similar boat lately. Okay, we can actually solve this more easily. Your speed back at 1. We'll remove the blobs from spawning. Means there will be no targets to use. If there are no targets, it will fall back through random direction. Oh, there we go. Should still be getting bubbles. Yeah, not moving at all. Well, let's try to fix movement again. Ah. Let's see, recent movie. I haven't watched a lot of movies recently. Last full movie that I watched, like I rewatched it, was Kung Fu Hustle. It's I have never watched a martial arts movie that has exceeded its quality. Like, yeah, there are, well, the Ip Man ones, the early ones, are still pretty good. But I feel like Kung Fu Hustle still does. It hits all the beats just right. Yep. The later Ip Man ones are, yeah. Oh yeah, Shaolin Soccer was good too. Similar vibe. No worries, Okaneki. Yeah, I think the Primo Gem farming stage that Genshin hits after a while, and pretty much all of them, is for a good period of time. There are lots of like, hey, visit this place, do this thing, and we give you a little bolus of them. But that starts to wear off steadily. And then the grind is substantial enough, and the lures are strong enough that the gotcha business model starts to increasingly rear its head. Uh, you don't have to buy into it, but it's the kind of thing I don't like. Target object. If we have that, then we're set. We don't need We have a target object or target set. But we should never be calling calculate object again. Okay, no. We don't need this. If we already have an object, use it. Otherwise, we set it. With a lot of those things, it's if you have the resources and if spending them won't put you in danger, then if it brings you happiness, then do it, you know? But if it's going to become an issue, then you shouldn't do it, you know? Which goes the same for like donating to streamers and whatnot. I will happily take your money, but don't donate if it's going to put you in harm's way in some way. You know, I don't need your I don't need you to spend your grocery money on me. Okay, if we have a target object, then we're going to set it. This is during the calculation. Okay, if we call calculate target, we are going to get that target. And we're going to say, do I have a target object? If I don't, I'm going to set it into local target. Otherwise, I will use it. And then I will just return local target. Okay. That's during our calculation. I think all of my targeters need to make sure that they aren't returning a different direction, when they shouldn't. But no, that's okay. When it calculated a target, it said that was the direction to go. But now the movement ones won't change it. And the facing ones won't assert it, will they? I'll get direction to target. Get that direction to the target. We return our target. So this doesn't affect the body to move. It just updates the direction. Yeah. It says this should be the direction. If it's not going to change the direction, but this could get messed up. Now we have a target object, So we have something that we have a direction to. Then move in a straight line. It just gets what it has and moves, returns it. And when it moves, it copies what it gets and it adds that to the velocity. It always accepts what it gets. So if we go into random direction, no. So target random mob. When it calculates a target, it gets the target. We copy that target. Then if there isn't a target object, we go through and we set one. If target mob this can skew it. This, well, no, it will do this once. From then on, it reports whatever direction it has. Get a bubble. So we don't want that resetting it to 0, and the random one should give it a direction. There we go. Occasional hitches in the handling of their movement. Oh, that's probably the projectile limit. Welcome back, Josh. Yeah, we're hitting projectile limit. That's where the gaps are. Because it can only emit 50 projectiles at a time. We can probably raise that number, but... projectiles, I think, are ultimately cheaper than mobs. Mobs are actually the most expensive thing to add to the world. It is pretty, though. It's a little blossom of wind-up mice. We have fine-tuned our physics further. We have broken some movement in places and then repaired it and broken it. We've talked a lot about optimization. And we're still teetering on the precipice of going down the road of adding upgrades to weapons. Like, if we touch these purple bubbles that appear, we are technically adding upgrades to the weapons. So every time I do this, I add 10 groups. And it technically increases the speed, but that's not what really is happening. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go back into our blob spawner. And we're going to go back to 10 a second. We can handle about, so far, about 300 blobs on the screen is no problem. Projectile-wise, we're easily able to handle the 50 that we limit it to. Hey there, Yuki. Welcome. We're testing our projectiles further here. Yes. There will be the way I'm picking up these bubbles is essentially a shorthand right now for the kind of thing that leveling up would do. Like, as we get closer to a playable state, eventually you will do something to level up, and it will present a choice to you. And that choice will be like, hey, do you want to add homing to one of your weapons? Okay, we can definitely see some lag here when we send out all these little projectiles. When there are enough blobs on the screen. So let's walk right into the middle of them. Okay, we can still see a problem that if they spawn and there is a target for them to collide with, then they're immediately wiped out. And that should not be. I think part of the problem is that we're adding them to the tree too soon. Because we don't need to add them to the tree because we've already instantiated them. But if we instantiate them, they can collide. But if we don't add them to the tree, they can't collide because they don't collide intrinsically. Okay. But that said, let's get in there and let's verify this. I don't want to lose this thought. Go into our mob factory. Okay, we create the body. We instantiate it. At this time, it exists. We don't need to worry about that. So we can set the stuff. We can create its movement. And then we should be able to add it to the tree. For science. Blobs are spawning. Blobs are working. We have one projectile set. I'm going to stand in the middle of them. Same problem. Same problem. We need to give them time to live, but we also need to make sure that if the first one collides, that it still works. Invulnerability for a period is viable. But that feels like we are trying to dodge an issue. I want to make sure we understand it properly. Yes, Josh, that is turned off right now. That's absolutely how it's going to happen. Is if a blob touches you, you steadily lose health until you lose. the game is not playable at this time. We're still building things. So a lot of the like game state doesn't yet exist. Attach it to the mob's body here. We add the mob to the world state here. As soon as this happens, the mob is in the world. This may yet be too soon. Yeah. I think this is part of our problem. Because as soon as this happens, they can collide. But the problem is, if we're creating the first mob in the collection, if every time we create it, it gets destroyed, then the subsequent ones won't be able to target properly or, you know, pop into existence properly. Like, it'll start to break down quick. So if we create its body, this will orphan it if we leave it alone. If we go into spawner, we go into create mob bodies. We iterate over their positions. This is us setting their target. Okay, for each group, we iterate over them. We're going to create all of them. For mob body and mob bodies. This mob in mob bodies. Sure, that's true. Factory dot. Welcome back, Milot. Okay. Oops. Okay, we have to go into the game. It's our player factory. Create mob body. Factory. Add mob. Player template. Dot up type player. I had changed the way that mobs were being instantiated, so I need to fix this. I appreciate the enthusiasm, Josh, but as I have said previously, I'm not really accepting suggestions for end state stuff, like raw game content stuff, because we're still working on how to make sure that the core skeleton of the game is working. There are plenty of things already designed out or thought out for content in the game, but we're not to that point yet. Like, these blobs are still placeholders. The purple bubbles are still placeholders. Dunno yet, PSS. One can hope. Oh, that's working better. Still not quite. We can collide with multiple of them at once. Let's get more bubbles here. We're getting more of them, but there should be way more projectiles triggered. That doesn't solve it. Then I like the prior pattern. So we're going to go into spawner. We're going to put this back. That. And then we're going to go into spawner again. I'll remove this line here. To work, and then we don't need to add mob. Next time we may need to implement that that spawn position randomizer. Are we calling that into the blobs in parallel? I think we are. I wonder if... do we need some sort of locking mechanism? There'd still be race conditions in that. It has to be herdable. We could go in and make it so that if we query if something is herdable, that it will return that it doesn't have that interface when it's under threat. Which would allow it to not be herdable. while it's like, it has already taken damage recently, it's not hurtable until it's ready again. That's part of the journey there, Josh. And as a reminder, folks, I will take advice on like the raw coding or questions on things like the full development process, but we are not taking suggestions on like the end state gameplay yet. Because we don't want to just call this. Because it's not dying until here. If we remove hurtable from the string collection here, from its array of interfaces, then it would cease to be hurtable. I think we need to revisit this entirely. I think we should shift more to the has function. Like, if it has a function, can be hurt, we can query if it can be hurt. Otherwise, we assume it doesn't. Alternately, we can hard code this. Now, it is we could have it where particular things have hurtable, but no, I think we should assume an interface. We should have an assumed interface like hurtable hurt. But we don't need to query this. So we're going to go into global nodes, and we're going to do this in order to break it. It's not in global nodes. Mob factory. Has interface. No. So this is has method is what we're looking for. More like a droid, Josh. Akin to a droid. Artificial in so much as a nanotype is built, or well, produced. There's not really a, construction of parts in the same fashion. I think ultimately, Tass, I'm going to need to keep this anyway. I don't have to keep asking if it has a method if I follow a pattern like this. It won't really change what's going on is part of the problem, but So calling this is effectively the same as calling has method on any of the methods that would be part of this interface. So if the method is supposed to be hurtable, like can be hurt, then we can assume that it has all of the other functions. This does the same, makes the same assumption, is that I have gone in and given an array of interfaces and say, if it has this interface, then I will subsequently call one of the functions that I assume is there. So like, so we're going to try to call get, we're going to say, does it have get interfaces? If it does, we're going to say, does this contain the interface that we want? If it does, then we're going to skip as method and we're going to call the assumed function. I feel like we have implemented it with extra steps we don't need anymore. It's kind of 6 one way, half a dozen the other. This makes it potentially clearer in code that if I'm calling has interface, that's what I mean. And can then code it. So if I'm calling has interface and then I call into that interface, then it potentially looks cleaner. So right here. So I say, does it have the hurtable interface? If it does, then it's okay for me to call the hurtable functions. If it doesn't, then don't call the hurtable functions. This is still, there's nothing stopping me elsewhere in code from doing it, but this at least lets me encapsulate it in a meaningful check. So let's keep using it. Hey there, Minty. Yes, we are doing a game development stream. And hey there, Drew. Welcome back. What we are working with right now, this is the number of blobs that exist. This is all test logic. So what we're struggling with right now is if I stand in the middle of them and I spawn 10 projectiles, at most, like the closest blobs get removed. Hey there, Bree. But 10 blobs should be getting removed because these projectiles shouldn't be able to hit something that's already been wiped out. And as soon as one projectile hits it, it's gone. So we're firing 20 things. So 20 blobs at most should go away. Well, actually, no, 20 blobs should go away. But they're not. Why aren't they? I think it's because this collision is happening with something that is already dead. So we are going to go into here and we're going to see. Oh, that still won't work. This is going to happen instantaneously is the problem. Okay. Just for sanity's sake here. Apple. False. Glass. False. True. This is a really crude, not really effective kind of lock. Print, debug. String as invert. Dying on the string. Dying. What we're interested in is a true result. So let's change this. Dying. Olin. Oops. Okay, here's going to be part of the problem. We created that mob body, and it got wiped out right away. Be right back, folks. Quick break. We're going to run a little bit long today. Okay, we're back. Okay. One, this shouldn't be able to really be shouldn't really be able to happen here. Um, we instantiated it, so it's an area in the world, but it's not yet part of. It's not yet part of the world. It can't be collided with, so this has to exist, right? I think we do need a period where things can't be hit. But no, this couldn't have been removed unless it spawned in the kill zone. But again, it can't collide until later. It can't move until here. And it shouldn't be collidable until here. This is still a problem, because this means it can be collided with as soon as it comes into existence. And it comes into existence during the spawning process. You're also getting a lot more things spawned right on top of each other. Bunch of these, get the projectiles going real fast and numerous. Let's add even more of them here. Yeah, right there, we got a whole bunch of them popped at once. We're not getting any sort of simultaneous scenario. Maybe we need the other side of the equation too. Okay, so we are preventing a blob from being hurt. If it's already been hurt. And a projectile won't go away unless it manages to hurt it. If we slow down spawns, then yes, it prevents overlapping. Oh, I see what you mean. Like the projectiles. We do want them to be able to appear effectively simultaneously. And we don't want them to exist until their whole group is done coming into existence. I mean, that's ultimately what we want, is that each group, ultimately, we want all of them to come into existence simultaneously, and we don't want them colliding until then. Interface thing is still just such a hassle. But I think we can get around some of it. I'll have to check in a moment here. We can have the code blocks, but we need some way of setting them up properly. Like, uniformly. Ember needs back scratches. Okay, let's... True. Readied. Mint. Bug. Okay, if hurtable gets called on it before it's readied. Doing okay, Drew. I am reaching, like... We are reaching that state where it's... We must fix this. We'll see how long that state lasts. Okay. The mouse is always readied by the time it's being called. Targetable and targetable. We don't actually need targetable anymore. Look at... have nearest mob yet. I'm going to leave that there because I really want that one. Don't call targetable anymore. Let's get rid of targetable on the blob. Clean it up further. So far, we only have hurtable. Okay. We don't have... There are things that interfaces might be useful for, but let's simplify. Let's simplify. So we're going to go into mob body. Where did I put mob body? Okay, mob body currently doesn't have much to it, but if we look at monster blob body, we have this get interfaces. We have target. Well, we don't need targetable position. We have hurtable hurt. We don't really need this. And it's not that we don't need the idea of an interface. Well, the idea of an interface as this structure is not bad. It's that right now, the only concept is hurtable. Because every mob can have health. Every mob can have... Even objects could have health. Projectiles can have health. The projectiles don't care. They're not going to report hurtable. Yeah, I think we can keep this really simple. There are a lot of ways we could keep this really simple. It's going to mean that there is... Yeah, let's keep it simple. Remove get interfaces. We are going to say... We're going to break this into two parts. Hurtable. Let's get them where they should be. On a mob body. Hurtable. False. By default, a mob is not hurtable. Showing hurt. It's an attack. Does nothing. This is the hurt interface. We want to check for hurtable. We check and see, is it hurtable? We can call hurt on it regardless, but the assertion is that we have a way to check if it can be hurt. We could just call hurt on it. And it can ignore it if it wants to. We could make this generic, though. Minus false. Just minus 0. Okay. We can set its hurtable state. All right. this way, something can alter it itself, or it can be altered from the outside. By default, a mob is not hurtable. So at the time of them getting set up, they're not going to be hurtable. Then in blob, we can say hurt. And mob body has a value called hurtable. So Zell, this is, we're trying to implement effectively what you said here. Is we're going in and saying like, okay, we can say that they're hurtable or not. That means the object itself can override that. We don't need hurt or dying. We can say if it's hurtable, queue free, and say hurtable equal to false. So what this will do is if the blob is in a hurtable state, it will die and it will turn off its hurtable state. If a mouse hits something that is not hurtable, but no, this isn't quite right. If it was hurtable and we return hurtable, so if it's not hurtable at the time that we come in, we didn't hit it. If it was hurtable at the time we came in, we're going to turn it off. We could put a return true, but I don't like layered returns. Weird. Okay, we star off the current state of hurtable and we return it. If it wasn't hurtable when we enter it, you didn't hurt it. If it was, you hurt it. That's how a blob works by default. Projectile mouse is never hurtable. And when we go into mob body, hurt returns a bool, and by default, it returns false. If you strike a projectile by default, well, if you strike anything by default, it doesn't get hurt. And by default, you'll look at it and say, it's not hurtable. If the individual implements a hurt function, then we can deal with that. This is going to get rolled into a type of mob body so that I can encapsulate this. I could even encapsulate the concepts that it represents so that we can say, you know, hey, when you reference hurt, this is what you get. But we'll visit this in a little bit. So we go into our mouse projectile, and we collide. And we're going to say if collide with dot hurtable colon. We call hurt on it. If it was hurt, we free it. So now these projectiles should not hit anything. Because right now, nothing is hurtable. So these mouse projectiles should fly right past the mobs or cling to them. Try that again. We already had an assumption of the targetable interface, but we should all have a position. Target. Has to be a mob body. There's no reason for this not to be a mob body. Everything is a mob out in the world. Unless it's like a grid. And that will be a different thing. You can't target the grid. And colliding with it will be a different thing, if at all. We're going to leave it as target object for now. It'd be a hassle to change all of it. There we go. Oh, Godot's editor has some bad usability features, let's call it. Removing parens or quotes, it is, let's call it clippy helpful. Okay, they're never hurtable, so they just latch on to their targets. This is technically what we want them to do. It looks kind of hilarious, but it's what we want them to do. Okay. So now in a spawner, so what I did is I went back and refactored tasks. Right now, the interface structure was largely vestigial. We were only using it really to have a hurt function. But pretty much everything that's a mob, it's relevant as to whether they can be hurt and that you can call hurt on them. Whether they're a player, a bullet, anything like that. So I changed it to be a variable on them, whether they are hurtable or not. And all mobs have a hurt function. So now what we'll have is we'll have the ability to just check, is it hurtable? And then I can call hurt on it. I can call hurt on it even if it's not hurtable. The internal thing will just say, well, it didn't work, you know? So that removes that need for now, and it also gives me a clean pattern to use to do this. In the future, I might have more things that are interface-like, in which case I can look at that interface model again. But because L mobs are hurtable or not, I can use this pattern. And it still gives me a clean thing to call on them. Okay. So we get through the whole thing. These mobs are now ready to go. Got their positions updated. So a whole group has been spawned for mob body as a mob body in mob bodies. Mob body. No, I have a thought. That's the idea there, Tess. If I find something else, then we'll have to make the decision, is this an interface that I can actually lay over anything, or is this actually intrinsic to them? Right now, the world only consists of different flavors of mob. Once we start doing something like adding walls, then we have something that is not a mob. But the fact that it isn't a mob is what tells us that it's not hurtable. So I won't be using mob-to-mob interactions on them anyway. Like, we'll have the player bounce off walls. We could have projectiles and monsters not be able to go through a wall, but they're not colliding with the object in the same sense because they're not mob bodies. It's just a physical obstruction. Okay. We have this in place. Now we want to be able to have the object say when it is hurtable. So we're going to go into blob. So it won't be in blob. We need to abstract this out into a full monster type. So that, or, player and monster and whatnot. We want some of this behavior to be generic to monsters so that we don't have to keep recoding this. It's not when it's ready. This is in our first physical frame. We know that it's not before they're ready that they're getting hurt. So now we need to have something that says they are ready to be hurt. All right. We're just going to kludge it for now. Say Boolean false. If first frame. This isn't right. This isn't right. This is... One, this is stupid. But it's also wrong. Set it to true and then check if it's true. That won't help at all. Okay, okay. First frame has not passed yet. If not first frame. First frame is true. Fixed it. Look at that. Look at that. That was the problem. Things could be hit as soon as they appeared. The collision was valid as soon as they appeared. So since the blobs aren't hurtable right away, we still have some weird spontaneous direction changing going on when we shouldn't. Like, these little guys shouldn't be changing direction the way they did. Like, we're getting some veer-offs happening. And that should not occur. But we're close enough. So what this has done is we can actually have piercing logic now, where a projectile will go through and say, like, or we can have iframe logic too. So say, like, a mob has been struck by a given projectile. We can have either the projectile remember, I already hit this one, or the creature could go into a I have just been hit state, or like a frame or something like that, or longer, so that there is a time where we check it again. But we'll see. We'll see. Still something wonky with the movement logic. See how they're all flowing down and left. They're changing targets the wrong way. There's more to fix. There's more yet to fix. But we now have it so that... Yeah, look at that. Why are you doing that? That's wrong. Don't do that. Well, clearly still something to fix in movement. But we now have it where there is a mechanism for saying that you can't hit something right as it is spawning. Blobs can't be hit until immediately after. Why did that even work? Okay, they check hurtable. Hurtable becomes false right here. And we're going to return false until it's existed for a full frame. Why did that even work? Oh, man. I only changed the blob, and it's the projectiles that are the problem, right? Okay, okay. Let's look at the mouse here. If what we're about to collide with is hurtable, we set it up, we call in and say, was it hurt? If it wasn't hurt, get free. Well, I'm sorry. If it was hurt, you know, If you did damage, go away. So we can't hit blobs that aren't present, that aren't ready to be struck. And as soon as they're hit, they cease to be ready to be struck. So we don't even go down this path. But that was already true. We weren't going down this path. Maybe we were getting into the functions when we didn't want to be. We could test this further, but we're already an hour over. Oh, let's take the remaining sanity we have and run. Oh, but good times tonight, folks. We've made further progress. We do have clearly more to do with movement. There are still holes in the way that we're doing this whole process. We have the way that the targets are flowing down and inherited from prior objects isn't working the way we want it to. So we're going to need to fix that. But we have to find out where it's breaking down. Right now, we have things that are colliding and then changing directions to a very uniform direction. That's weird. I'm wondering if there isn't some other object that is gaining the identifier of it, or that there is some reference that's causing that direction to be so uniform. Because that time we were getting down and left as the default. I think what I might do at the start of the next, if I remember, is I'm going to change random direction to just be to the right. That it will be to the right. And see if when they go into their default state, do they just go to the right? Because that should have been overridden by that time. If it is not overridden, then there is still that problem with our chain. But in any event, thanks everybody for joining us for this recent foray into why does that even work? I hope you had a good time. Hey there, Copperpot, you're joining us right here at the end. Folks, if you like what you saw and would like to see more, and you haven't already, consider liking, following, subscribing, that kind of thing, so you get more content like that in the future. If you'd like to financially support the channel, you can do so through YouTube memberships, super chats, Patreon, and Coffee. Those are all available in the link tree below, or, on YouTube. With all that said, I again hope that you have a good rest of your evening, and I will see you next time.